Vladimir Poleganov is a Bulgarian writer and translator. His most recent novel, The Other Dream, was published in 2016. He teaches fantasy fiction writing at Sofia University, where he is pursuing a PhD in Bulgarian literature, and in 2016 he was a resident of the International Writing Program.
Hi, my name is Vladimir Poleganov, and I'm a writer from Bulgaria. I write short stories, novels, and from time to time screenplays. And my writing is mostly focused on the strange, the weird, the fantastic, but my influences come from many types of literature and that are both realistic and non-realistic in my day so far.
Very nice. So we are ready to start whenever you are. I am recording, so
okay.
Go ahead. I will be keeping track of the time, so I might wave at you.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. But first, I'll just explain in general what I'm going to talk about. Writing and social issues, and how social issues can be used for writing both realistic and non-realistic novels and short stories. So at first, I'm just going to speak generally about social issues and social issues in writing. So what is the social in a novel or in a short story? The social is usually the class of the narrator or the character. It is their race, their sexuality, and the majority or the minority they belong to, and the visibility of that minority if they belong to a certain minority. And the social is also the way the physical setting around the characters is constructed, and the way this physical setting finds its way through the language of the novel or the short story. So basically, the social can mean almost everything in a novel, and it sometimes can be overwhelming to the reader if you use too many details or too much information, and if you make this not a background but the foreground. So in my writing and in my experience as a reader, I found two very important things that make the social look good in a novel or a short story. The first one is the voice, and the second one are the details. And the voice, when you have a character or characters, or just have simply one narrator, you always have to know who is speaking. So who is that person? Where is he or she from? What is he or she like? And how are they speaking? And from what position in society they're speaking? And by society, I don't mean only society in general. It can be a small group of people, like a family, but it's still a social group of people. So once you decide on what your character is going to be like, you have to think of the way they're going to speak and the things they're going to speak about, and most importantly, the things that will make impression on them during the unfolding of the novel or the story. And the other bit are the details that construct the social in your story or your novel, and they could be as little as small gestures made by the characters or the people the characters meet, and description of the setting, and also big themes and ideas and even ideologies But what I found useful when writing about the social is to keep in mind the ideology or the big theme, the big social thing while writing, but to keep it also at a certain distance so that your characters can come to the foreground and speak as persons, as human beings, as more psychological than social beings. And when they do this, the social always come through their language and through their actions. If you don't do this, you sometimes risk becoming a writer of long narratives filled with monologues about race, class, gender, and politics. And this might be interesting to some people, but it makes the book a different type of book. It's not, to me, it's not a psychologically convincing story. So I always try to find the social through the personal and through the psychological. And that's why I think that these two things, the voice on one hand and the details that describe everything from the way the character feels to the way the character speaks to the way the character lives in a certain surrounding with certain people, in a city, in a country. These two things combined, they make the identity first of your characters and then of your novel. Ursula Le Guin's short story, The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas, is a good example of an allegory that is disguised as a science fiction story. And also a story that has social commentary, which is not on the foreground, but in the background. And Ursula Le Guin has constructed a society that at first looks like an utopian society. It's a carefree, beautiful place where people have live in peace, and they have many carnival-like events almost every day. And the reader is left with the impression that the writer is just describing the perfect place for living, the perfect social space. And then suddenly the point of view of the narrator changes from the city, from the streets, from the many people, to one room and one person, and that is a child locked inside a cell. And the people of Umelas, when they arrive at a certain age, they are required to go into that room and stare at the child for a certain period of time. And after that, each of them decides whether they should stay in and continue living in that city or leave it. And some, of course, decide to go on and continue with their lives, but others leave. And the reasons for their leaving are not explained by the author. They're left open to interpretation, and anyone can take this both images of the social, which is extremely positive, and the personal, which is absolutely terrible, and do whatever they want with them. So this story is, I think, is the best example of how someone can use allegory to write about social issues. Because it describes a society, and then it kind of destroys this society with this image of the locked child. And another good example of writing about social issues in a dystopic or utopian novel is Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. And in that novel, she uses the first-person narrative and the third-person narrative for each chapter. And I think that's a very good idea, because she's creating two narratives. One is the personal and one is the social. And the society in this novel is entirely constructed around the idea of the female body as the vessel for life. This is a story that takes place several decades in the future, in a country called Gilead, which might be the entire United States or might be just part of the United States. But in this society, not many women can bear life. So only some of them are able to do this, and these women are used as almost as animals. They're not allowed to read, they're not allowed to participate in social life normally as others do, and they're just used to give birth to children which are then taken from them and taken from them as used as normal children for normal families. But Margaret Atwood has created this amazing. She had found an amazing way to use the social, and that is entirely through the body of the woman in society. And I think that's it could be useful to anyone who wants to write about social issues, to find a focus for yourself and use that focus as a starting point. And this focus has to be more detailed than just a theme. I think it's more useful to find a certain body than, for example, a certain race, and or a certain space like a street than an entire city, and go from there. Because this way you will be more focused and more detailed in your descriptions, and through these descriptions the truth about the world you're constructing will come out. And also there's another, I think, great American writer. Her name is Octavia Butler, and her writing is mainly about survival, and survival in somehow disrupted social order. And her most famous story is a novel called Kindred. It's a novel one can learn a lot from about how you write the social through the personal, because it's a story of a girl from the 70s in the previous century who is transported back in time to the period of slavery. But the Butler novels I want to talk about are a trilogy of novels called Xenogenesis. It's about the end of humanity as we know it. Humanity destroys itself, and at the same time aliens come and save it from destruction. But the price of this, of all this, is that they change the bodies of the people and make them something else. They make them alien. And what Octavia Butler does is to make the physical social. So she is writing about societies, she's writing about families after this apocalyptic event on Earth. And she's also writing about the societies and the families of the aliens that come to Earth. But everything comes through the bodies of the characters, because their bodies are constantly changing and they're changed from the outside. And every character is finding themselves first into their bodies, which are not their bodies anymore, and then on their planet, which is not their planet anymore, because it has been changed by the aliens. It's filled with alien life and alien plants and so on. And they start learning how to live in these new surroundings within their new bodies. But also, what Octavia Butler does is, through these, is to describe through these changed bodies and these extremely alien aliens, the way social systems on Earth nowadays work. And this trilogy has a lot to offer in terms of writing on gender, on class, on race, on family, and also on group psychology, which are the basics of social writing and social issues writing. Science fiction, you see that almost every science fiction writer uses social issues, because this is the only way you can show what has changed into the world of the novel and what is different from our world. But